is Roman Polanski's new movie. An officer and a spy has been playing in New York. This wouldn't normally be news, but Polanski himself is an incredibly controversial figure. In 1977, he was arrested for drugging and raping a 13-year-old girl. And none of his movies have been shown in the US since 2014 when Venus in Furs was shown. So it's quite a story. The Washington Jewish Week headlines it. The movie has got some rather mixed reviews, to put it politely. One in the New York Times, particularly from Richard Brody in the New Yorker, that sees the movie as self-centered. But not everyone sees the movie in quite as black and white terms. My guest today, Charles Taylor, has a piece in Liberties on Polanski's Nation of Pain. Charles is joining us from Harlem in New York. He's seen the movie. Charles, is it a good film?
I think it's a great film.
Why?
I think that there is a command of craft in it that you only get when you've been making movies for a while and you're able to deploy it smoothly without calling attention to itself. I think Polanski has achieved that here. And as I wrote in the article, I think it's the culmination of a theme that has been going through his work for the last, well, it would be 31 years now, of what it means to be a victim of violence, how victims attempt to function without embracing the sentimentalization of being a victim, and about trying to exist in political and social structures that have brought about the victimization that these characters are experiencing.
As I said, Richard Brody in the New Yorker strongly disagrees with you. He argues that it's, and I'm quoting him here, there's something repellent about the idea of Polanski likening himself cinematically to Dreyfus. The movie, of course, is about Alfred Dreyfus, the French military officer accused by anti-Semites, a very famous case, the J'accuse case in late 19th century France. We could argue, Charles, of course, about the quality of the film. I haven't seen it myself. But why would Polanski make a film so clearly touching on his own case, his own life?
I don't believe in the first place. I don't believe it does. Richard, who I respect, said that. Manohla Dargis claimed it also in her piece in the New York Times. I'd like them both to tell me how Polanski is identifying with a character who is off screen for the great majority of the film. He's in it for a few scenes at the beginning, and if anything, and a few scenes at the end. And he's a character who, Manohla Dargis complained about this, but it is historically accurate, who is not a particularly likable character. He's stiff, he's stern, he's unyielding. You can read that characterization of him in Jean-Michel Berdin's book, The Affair, which is probably the most well-known contemporary account of the case. I think and I know Polanski has said some things, he feels a kinship, but I'll stick with D.H. Lawrence here. Trust the tale, not the teller. I see the focus here is on Picard, the Army intelligence officer who is an anti-Semite, who realizes that Dreyfus has been framed and sets about trying to right that wrong, and who was court-martialed and imprisoned for that. So I don't go with the idea that this is some transparent allegory for his own woes. If he thinks
No one's saying that, Charles. No one's saying it's a transparent allegory. Polanski could have made the movie about anything. Here's a man, and I don't know enough about the case to get into the detail of whether or not he's guilty, but he has a terrible history of sexual criminality.
Well,
he's not allowed to come into this country.
He's definitely guilty.
Right, he's definitely guilty. He's not allowed to come into this country. He's an enormously controversial figure, a man of enormous talent. Clearly, he made one of my favorite movies, Chinatown. He made The Pianist, many other great films. But why make a film that even enables someone like Brody or Dargas in the Times to accuse him of making a self-centered film, making something so repellent? Why not make a musical or something completely disconnected with his own story?
Well, can you imagine a Roman Polanski musical? I mean, the answer I would say
a great director would respond to that by actually going out and making one.
Or a great director would make the film that he's made. I don't think, as far as enabling the critics, I reject that. I don't know how a filmmaker or a writer or anyone who's going to face critics is supposed to project what is going to be in their mind. And
but everybody knows, Charles. Let's just be clear about Polanski, as Brody writes in The New Yorker. And I'm quoting him, by the time Polanski had started filming, things had changed for him in France. A journalist, Andra Muller, launched a Me Too campaign against him. A number of other women have come out of the woodwork suggesting sexual criminality on his part. I mean, this is a disturbing case, isn't it?
It's a very disturbing case.
So why, again, coming back to making a film about Dreyfus? I'm sure, I personally am not going to see the film. It would be the last film I would ever see. But why would he even touch on something so distastefully absurd?
I don't see what you're saying. What is distastefully absurd? You're talking about a case where the director was admitted to rape. And there have been other accusations against him. And you're talking about a case where a man was framed for espionage. I don't see those as now, if you're saying, well, I mean, Polanski agreed to charges. So
he's not claiming any innocence. In your piece, no. You argue, and to be fair to you, you're saying, I'm not arguing that Polanski's art excuses his crime, which goes without saying. I'm noting and interrogating the maturity of his late work. But at what point, Charles, does an artist either just acknowledge guilt and shut up, or make art completely disconnected with their own criminality, what they've been?
You're assuming that there's a connection to his criminality, and I don't. I suppose we could argue this whole morning. I do not.
Well, but to come back, whether or not, as I said, I haven't seen the film, so it's hard for me to comment on the movie itself. But just making a film, as I said, about Dreyfus, someone at the heart of such a controversial legal case, you're saying it's really entirely separate, foreign to Polanski's own narrative? Because in your piece, you talk also about some of the other experiences in Polanski's
Yes, no,
life.
I'm not. I'm saying that it is in line with a theme that has been in his work for the last 31 years, which I outlined in the piece and I outlined a little earlier in the interview. What I reject is that the Dreyfus figure, the Dreyfus case, is about his own personal victimization.
Tell us a little more then about at least your reading, Charles, of Dreyfus's, not of Dreyfus, that was a slip. Yeah. Polanski's life. He's had a remarkable life. I mean, I'm sure at some point someone will do a biopic about him. His life is remarkable on lots of levels.
There'll never be a biopic made about Roman Polanski. It couldn't possibly be funded. The fact that this movie took
Well, a critical one might be by a woman,
yeah,
perhaps.
yes, but the fact that this movie took 6 years to open in the United States and is opening on one screen, I think that says what we need to know about the state of the business right now.
What do you mean?
What do I mean? I mean that people who are we are right now judging the person and not the art. That's what is happening right now in the film business.
And you don't agree with that? You don't
No,
agree
I
that
don't.
there
I
are
don't-
crimes
I don't-
hold on, but leaving aside Polanski, there are crimes you can commit where you would separate what you call this work of art from the criminality of its creator?
Yes, the quality. I mean, this seems to me, this whole train of thought seems to me to go back to some fantasy that art is made by inherently good people.
No, it doesn't.
Well, I believe it does. You believe it doesn't? I believe it does. We go to see. No one would complain about a museum doing a retrospective of Caravaggio. He murdered a man. Surely that's a worse crime than what Polanski did.
Well, I'm not sure we want to get in the equivalence of what Caravaggio did versus Polanski's raping of 13-year-olds.
Let's stick to the question.
But coming back to, I mean, let's talk movies. I mean, there are a lot of.
To finish a thought here.
Yeah, go on.
Thank you. I reject the idea that people's characters, people of bad character, of horrible character, can make great works of art. It's a paradox. I don't pretend to understand it, but it is something that exists. And we have to ask ourselves, what are we judging as critics? Are we judging the work of art? Or are we judging the person? I think the courts should judge Polanski, the person, for what he did. I think his art should be evaluated on its own. His experiences don't make him a good artist or a bad artist. And I said that in the piece. They may add to the sensibility of what his sensibility, they may add to what he wants to make films about. But there are a lot of people who have committed sexual crimes. There are a lot of people who survived the Holocaust. There are a lot of people who have had loved ones murdered in horrendous ways. All those things apply to Polanski. But not everyone who has experienced one of those things is capable of being an artist, of translating experience into some sort of observation, some sort of achieved observation. Talent comes into it. It isn't simply experience. But yeah, I subscribe to what I understand to some is the rather radical idea of thinking that people's art should be judged on their art.
Yeah, I couldn't disagree with you more. I think there's a fundamental difference between going to see a Polanski film, for example, where the guy, as you said, has been accused, he's guilty of raping a 13-year-old and various other sexual crimes. And say going to see a Hitchcock movie about Vertigo, for example. Hitchcock is acknowledged now as being a bully of his actresses. He certainly had an odd attitude to women. But that's an entirely different experience from Polanski and the division between Polanski's criminality and his creativity.
Well, it's certainly.
I mean, we could extend this to absurd lengths, Charles. I mean, at what point does someone's crime eliminate them from making movies or writing books or writing poetry? Are you suggesting?
Well, I assume
of doing these things.
If they're jailed for it, they're not going to have an opportunity to do that. I mean, what you're saying. What point does their crime stop them from this? I'm not sure what you're asking. If they are convicted of a crime, they're imprisoned, they're not going to get a chance to do that. If they are convicted of a crime, they serve their time, or they Are they no longer able to write? Does that mean their First Amendment rights are taken away if we're talking in this country? And you're talking about extending things to an absurd degree. Well, I mean, it's not so absurd to think of programming of people who are programming films in theaters and repertory cinemas refusing to show a Hitchcock film because of what has been alleged was his treatment of actresses. We have now people at Random House, employees at Random House rose up and would not allow, made it impossible for the company to publish a collection of Norman Mailer essays that was planned.
But are you comparing that, and I agree with you on that, the Mailer story, whether or not movie houses, cinema should show a Hitchcock movie, with the Polanski case? What's his legal status? Again, remind me, Charles. If he came back into the U.S., would he be arrested?
He'd be arrested. He'd be arrested. And what no one wants to say in this is that he would be arrested, which is a state of things that Samantha Geimer, the woman who he raped, has spoken out against. She doesn't believe he should be. She believes that they were both screwed over by the legal system in this case.
Has he been punished then for any of his crimes?
Well,
legally, I mean, has he gone to jail?
He has not gone to jail. He was ready to go to jail. And again, he was ready to go to jail. There was a deal in place, agreed to by Polanski's lawyers, agreed to by the prosecutor, and agreed to by Samantha Geimer's lawyers. The judge, who was under public pressure, who, when he met with Polanski's lawyers and the district attorney and Samantha Geimer's lawyers, was on the phone to a Los Angeles Times reporter saying, well, no, I'm not going to go along with this deal. Talking to this reporter before he had rendered this verdict, talking about it in terms of his own public image and the pressure on him rather than the legal merits of the case. When that deal was scuttled, Polanski left the country.
So you're presenting him almost as a victim here, are you?
Well, he is certainly, he and Samantha Geimer both were certainly screwed over by a corrupt judge. And it's worth noting that when Polanski's lawyer filed a brief for that judge, Judge Lawrence Rittenband, to be removed from the case, that the DA concurred with him and signed on to it. The DA wanted him removed too. So if the people who are trying to put Polanski in jail are saying that the judge acted unethically in the case, then yeah, it is possible, even for, shocking though you may find this, it is possible even for convicted criminals to be victimized by a legal system.
Yeah, and that happens all the time. You're talking to me from Harlem. There are many other cases up there, I think, of people who have less power, money, prestige. What's your relationship then with Polanski?
I don't know.
Tell me why you feel, it's an interesting conversation, Charles, and I appreciate your openness on this front. And you've written a very controversial piece. Did Polanski change your life? Is he your favorite movie director?
No, not by any means. I dislike more of his movies than I like. But I think he's done a remarkable body of work. The late work, I think, is quite remarkable. I think it's consistent and mature and intelligent. And I certainly understand people who do not want to see his films. I understand that, completely understand that. The problem is when they start saying that no one else should be able to see his films either, which is the stance that they've taken. I don't have to like, I mean, I like.
But I'm not sure. I mean, even Brody. I mean, Brody's not saying that in New Yorker. He's just giving the
I'm
movie a
not
bad
saying,
review.
David, I'm not saying Richard Brody is saying that. Richard Brody, I don't think, who's an honorable man, I don't think would say the film shouldn't be shown. But certainly people are saying that. People believe that. Certainly and it's of course a business decision. 6 years for a film that won the César for Best Picture from a famous director to get an American distribution deal. And I mean, there are certainly cases of people who have not been convicted of a crime, people who have been done things far less or simply are rumored to have done things who are not able to get their work shown. I don't like that state of things.
But that's I take your point, and I agree with you. But that's a straw man when it comes. It seems to me a straw man when it comes to this. There's always going to be people who say, "Oh, we should ban Polanski's films." I agree that Polanski's films, especially if they win major awards in France, should probably be shown. But that doesn't make him, or perhaps even his art, more or less more palatable.
I'm not saying it makes it more. You seem to keep wanting to say I'm making claims I'm not making. I didn't say it makes it more palatable. I said it deserves to be shown. People deserve a chance to see it, to make of it whatever they want to make of it. What I make of it is it's a great film. People may think it's a very bad film. People may think it's a mediocre film. Some people might be bored by it. But I think that I don't believe that that opportunity should be taken away from people.
Yeah, and I don't think that's not what we're debating. I agree with you on that. When I was reading your piece, and it's a provocative piece in Liberties this month, Polanski's Nation of Pain, I thought of one of my favorite films, Chinatown, which I'd never really associated. I hadn't given it a lot of thought with Polanski, certainly with this case and what we're discussing. You bring this up in your Liberties piece on Robert Towns's original script. How, in your view, is Chinatown itself somehow bound up in the complexity of Roman Polanski's life and crimes?
Well, I don't think it's bound up in his crimes. It's bound up in his life, in that a man who had seen the worst of the world, as he had, I think he was very reluctant to believe that evil would be punished or that things could be set right. And so I think because of his character, he probably rebelled against doing the ending Town had written, where things are somewhat set right, where the villain is exposed and his victims get away. And I'm not a psychoanalyst. If I had to guess, I would say to a man who's experienced what he did, that was just not the case.
Just to remind everyone, you say what he experienced. He wasn't in a camp, but he was part of the Warsaw Uprising.
His parents were, his family, except for his father, were murdered in the camp. He escaped. He spent World War II wandering around Poland, dodging Nazis. There's a famous story about them shooting bullets at him to watch him skitter away, and Nazis laughing at that. He saw some brutal stuff in rural Poland, and those experiences formed the basis of his friend Jerzy Kosinski's novel The Painted Bird. So that was the wartime experiences. He's a Holocaust survivor. And of course, we all know his wife was murdered. His pregnant wife was murdered by the man.
Yeah, and Tarantino just the Sharon Tate story. It was a recent film from Tarantino, wasn't it?
Yeah, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood,
in which, of course, Polanski has nothing to do with the Manson murder of Tate. We did a show a couple of months ago, Charles, with someone who's written a book about Primo Levi and his suicide. Mm-hmm. I'm not suggesting that Polanski should have committed suicide. I'm not suggesting that anyone who went through that level of evil, family wiped out, dodging the Nazis, living in Poland, and all the rest of it, should end up like Primo Levi and giving up on life. But it seems as if Polanski's strategy for what he experienced is the reverse of Levy's, whereas Levy just, it seemed after a while, it just couldn't continue to live. Polanski's given life another chance, and I guess in a way life gave Polanski another chance, which perhaps you could argue, I know you're more sympathetic to Polanski, you could argue that he screwed it up a second time too.
Well, he did. I mean, but you know, I don't think it's a balance sheet. I mean, I have never denied what the man did, never denied his crimes. And I've never denied what I think about his movies, whether I like them, which for many years, with a few exceptions, I didn't, or whether I like them. As I do the later work, I really do believe that you have to separate the art from the artist.
Yeah, but you clearly, I mean, you've gone out of your way. I mean, you've written a whole piece about this. This is not something, this is not a throwaway remark. And this separation of art and artist, I think, I mean, you bring up the Caravaggio story, which actually, I'm not sure if you saw the recent TV series on Patricia Highsmith's first Ripley novel, in which Caravaggio was compared to Tom Ripley. It's another interesting comparison. Did you see that?
I didn't, but it's an interesting comparison.
But again, and I've asked you this question before. Is there any kind of crime? You say, well, if it's a bad enough crime, they'll end up in jail. But let's say for some reason or other, as Polanski has avoided jail by not coming back to the US, you can avoid jail. Is there any kind of crime that would completely turn you off a movie?
Sure. Of course, yeah, but it wouldn't. Would it turn me off? Sure, but it wouldn't have any bearing on the question of whether it's a good movie. And this is what seems hard to grasp: the question of whether a work, a film, a book, a piece of music, whatever, is good or not. That's a separate question.
Okay, so I take that point. I mean, I think you and I have to. Yeah, we have to disagree on that. So why is An Officer and a Spy, why is it leaving aside Polanski, let's say it was made by someone we'd never heard of, some obscure French director. Why is it a good film?
Well, I think I mentioned that. It's, first of all, it's a fascinating story. Secondly, it's a very handsome production that does not let the production values stand in the way of the suspense of the story, the telling of the story. It is about, it's about really two people, about Dreyfus and Picard, the intelligence officer who clears him. Both men who are, although they were finding this corruption in the institution that they had joined, the army, they remained in their way loyal to the army and certainly loyal to France. When Dreyfus at the beginning of the film is being taken away to Devil's Island, he yells, "Long live the army, long live France," and he means it. And what we're seeing in the film is the tension between the Picard character and the people who are in charge of this institution, who think that they can protect it by framing Dreyfus, by lying about what they did, by shutting ranks. And Picard, who is a genuine patriot, believes that that's how institutions, that's how countries crumble. So I think often when a period film is made, you often get the sort of great man movie making where you have people in costumes standing around in handsome rooms and talking, and it's deadly dull. This isn't. This has the excitement of discovery of the story, the question of whether this wrong is going to be redressed. It's beautifully acted, and it's just completely compelling. And as I said, at a time when, I mean, Polanski could not have known this when he made it, but seeing it in this country, when there is a large debate about what it means to be loyal to your country, and to what idea, what ethics, what principles you're being loyal, the film has enormous resonance.
On both left and right, of course, in this country.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, there you have it. Interesting conversation with Charles Taylor, as a very provocative piece in Liberties this month. Polanski's Nation of Pain. He loves An Officer and a Spy. I have to admit, it's not on in San Francisco, so I don't even have the choice of going. I wouldn't go, or I guess it probably makes me a little bit of a moral censor, but I believe that there are points where enough is enough when it comes to an artist. Charles doesn't agree. Interesting conversation, Charles. Keep going, keep seeing Polanski, and we'll do another show. Maybe you'll find something else controversial to defend or talk about. Thank you so much.